Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host Shwin and this is episode 569. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPan89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this Wednesday afternoon? How are you enjoying your All-Star break?
Doing pretty well. Enjoying. Yeah, can't complain. Didn't watch much of All Star Weekend.
Yeah, I don't think you missed too much of All-Star weekend anyway. It wasn't a very fun-filled weekend. And certainly the attendance left much to be desired. We're not going to talk about All-Star weekend. Honestly, I could care less about how to fix All-Star weekend. It's nothing but a money-making exercise for the league. And yeah, I don't know. I enjoy watching basketball. I don't think a shitty All-Star game is going to change that, so I'm not worried about it. We'll talk about the Knicks. We'll talk about other things. But before we do that, I do have to mention that Strickland has a Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/the Strickland. We're truly appreciative for any support you're able to give. The $6 tier gives you access to full episodes of the Friday podcast of Pod Strickland, and you also get access to the Strickland Discord, where you can chat with other fans and the site staff. The $9 tier gives you access to even more podcasts, like Strictly NFL, and Strick and Roll, my own solo pod. Those are good places to start if you're interested. Plus, if every listener signs up for the Patreon, I don't have to read these ads anymore, which should be the biggest bonus of all. Also, thank you to our sponsor, FanDuel. FanDuel has you covered for all of your betting needs. If you want to get something in on the NBA regular season, a lot of games tomorrow, check out FanDuel. They'll be covered for game bets, props, player props, game props, whatever you want. Whatever tickles your fancy, FanDuel has you covered. We can just start with some basic Knicks stuff. The Knicks are back in practice today. Two kind of interesting tidbits. One actually very important tidbit. OG Anunoby fully cleared, back to practice. He had something called a toe avulsion. Basically, his fingernail ripped off. He is unsure of how it happened, which is par for the course for OG because God forbid he ever have a normal injury.
Toenail, wasn't it?
Yeah, it would be nice for him to have a normal injury once in a while. But no, only the weirdest injuries for OG Anunoby. And most mysterious injuries. Anyway, he's back. That's great news for the Knicks. The other news, which, take it for what it is. I'm not sure if it's news or what, but it was a quote from Mike Brown, and it is worth sharing. So I will say it here. This was James Edwards III on Twitter shared this. Brown on what signing Jeremy Sochan, who the Knicks have signed now officially, means for Mohamed Diawara. I've given young guys opportunities over vets, but I'm going to give Jeremy an opportunity. I'm going to play who is best for us. Jeremy just got here, so I have to see rather quickly what he brings before heading into playoffs. I don't know. Obviously, OG coming back is great news. The Knicks need him. It's nice that they were able to kind of, get a couple wins without him. But obviously, we know the best version of this team requires OG Anunoby. And, the fact that he avoided any type of major long-term injury, I think, is the biggest kind of, or the most important thing from that news. And, as far as this Sochan Diawara thing, I just struggle to. I really like Mohamed Diawara. I thought he should have gotten minutes earlier in the season. I was saying it earlier in the season that I would have liked to kind of blood him, I guess, sooner rather than later. And obviously, to Mike Brown's credit, he has gotten him in there. He has given him chances. And, we obviously started seeing some really promising signs before the All-Star break, very specifically in that game against Boston, where he did a really good job on Jaylen Brown. And then he had a really nice game against the Philadelphia 76ers as well. He's shooting really well from three. I think he's over 40% now for the season. Small sample, but it's encouraging to see. Obviously, we know about the defense, the motor, all those things are great. But, and I tweeted this. One, I don't really think this comment, at least the way it seems to have been phrased, means that Diawara will not play or that Sohan is going to take all of his minutes. Um, it feels like the frame of the question was a little bit leading. I think Sohan will see minutes. It could come at the cost of Diawara at times. It could also mean that, look, we have 5 back to backs the second half or the rest of the way. We know Mitch doesn't play back to backs. I could definitely see Mike Brown being interested in maybe seeing what Sohan and OG could do together as a small ball kind of front court. I think that's something to consider. We also know Jordan Clarkson was getting minutes prior to um, the All Star break because of injuries the Knicks had. Obviously, Deuce McBride, who's still out, and OG Ananobi. Um, I don't think Clarkson is going to stay in the rotation, and so that frees up some more minutes. How those get allocated, obviously, I'm not sure, but I don't think he'll be in the rotation. And look, we've seen Brown experiment in a lot of different ways. Um, we've seen him not close games with the Cat. We've seen him not close games with Mikel. We've seen him not close games with a bunch of guys. Um, and I think that in and of itself lends itself to, let's just see how it all works out. And the other part is like, hey, guess what? You can't have been complaining, which a lot of Knicks fans did, and I understand. I think was a valid complaint. We need better depth. We need more depth. We got to address this. We got to add more bodies that can play in the rotation. We need more size. We need more wings. We need more forwards. You can't all like complain about that and also have complained about, man, Tibbs doesn't experiment enough. We need to coach that experiments. We can't treat the regular season like, the fucking game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals every night. Like we have to be willing to sacrifice some short term pain for long term gain. And like if you held those views, then you can't really be upset about one, what Mike Brown said, and two, the thought that, hey, yeah, maybe DOR loses some minutes here or there to Sohan. I mean, that's kind of the entire point, right? Is that you use this stuff to see everything at your disposal, and experiment with things that maybe you don't even fully buy into, but you want proof of concept or proof that something doesn't work. So um, I I can't really get that upset about it, and I don't think it's very concerning at all. Anything that he said, regardless of how you interpret it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think one, I actually see their roles as slightly different. We've talked about this. Ideally, Diawara could have been more of a small ball five, but you're compromising on the glass. Sohan is a pretty good rebounder. He's a true 6'10". He's bouncier than Diawara, so he's not some great rim protector, but it seems more viable that he could be a small ball five. I don't think either of us have given up hope on Hukporti, but even when Mitch is healthy, Sohan gives you a different look, and they may want to go to a small ball look at times in the playoffs, right? I think thinking they're obviously not going to face this year, but thinking back to that Indiana series, I definitely could have liked that for a few minutes of time to get the Knicks going. This is an offense first team, and we know that Sohan has an interesting a very specific set of skills. They experimented in San Antonio with him as a point forward. So obviously that didn't work out, but he has some ball handling skills for his size, decent vision and feel, high energy guy, can generate events, can get them in the transition and even start some fast breaks. A little bit of a different skill set than Diawara. So I think that the small ball five, which is not something they've really had at all, is a very intriguing part of this. I mean, Cat isn't really the same kind of. I mean, you can play five out with Cat. You wouldn't be playing five out with Sohan because he's not a reliable shooter. But in terms of being able to play faster, get up and down the court, start, throw a wing maybe or throw a wing type defender at one of these bigs who's very interior focused. It just gives you a different look, and like that's what you and I have been harping on a lot, right? Is how many different looks can you throw? One, you're going to need them because you're going to play four different teams, right? The path for the Knicks could look something like Toronto or Orlando round one, then round two maybe Boston, right? Then Detroit or Cleveland, and then OKC, right? These are very different styles. OKC is tons of athleticism and very MVP level score. A few different options, ways to beat you. Detroit is very physical, pretty heliocentric on offense. You may want a different strategy there. You might want more size there. Boston can go 5 out, doesn't really have much size, and you may want to run on them a little bit. And against Toronto or Orlando, there's other considerations, right? Especially if you're struggling to score in the half court. Guys like Sohan can juice the offense maybe a little bit by getting you in transition more. So I don't see tons of overlap. To your larger point, though, there's going to be some conflict. One, you just kind of got to hope that Brown is going to get a better sense of when to push these buttons. This is something we talked about. Jarris Walker got minutes one game in the playoffs, and then he wouldn't. And it was situationally used, and Carlisle had a pretty good plan. And you're hoping that Brown is picking that up. So there might be games where Sohan is a better option than DOR, right? Where you need a little bit more athleticism. You want it to get into transition more. There may be games where DOR is going to provide a little bit more robust interior defense, not going to make as many mistakes. DOR is a much better. I mean, it's not the volume you'd expect yet, but DOR is looking more and more like a capable shooter in a way that Sohan simply never has been. So you'll experiment and you'll try these things, but I think a differentiator is that Sohan has proven that he can play the 5. You put him next to OG. You put him. I think when Deuce is healthy, a Brunson, Deuce, Mikal, OG, Sohan lineup is very interesting. But even with Shamit in place of Deuce, I would even say Jose. But I know a lot of people don't think you should play Brunson and Jose together. It gives you more possibilities, and that's what we should want. As many possibilities, as many different ways to attack. It's on Brown to take full advantage. That's part of the reason he was brought here. And you bring up an excellent point. Yeah, 5 back-to-backs left. Mitch probably isn't going to be playing those back-to-backs. So you'll need to test your depth. You're going to have people in and out of the lineup. Cat has been up and down with health the whole year. OG getting over an injury, but he's not exactly an Iron Man. And then you may want to rest, once in a while, someone like Hart even, right? Because Hart plays very hard, and you do want to make sure that he's ready to go in the playoffs. So, and I think, we're still getting out of this Tibbs mindset where situational means you don't play, which it doesn't quite seem to be like that with Brown. Clarkson has been in and out of the lineup. Kolek has been in and out of the lineup. It does seem to be like for a few games it sticks. But I do think we're kind of worried that it's black or white, right? And we've been through lineup frustrations, going back to Alfred Payton and quickly, and going back to Frank not getting minutes, and there's the whole Cam Reddish thing. If you get out of that mindset a little bit, more options are always good. So I think this is a little bit playing on some of the fears and worries, and also DOR is a young guy, and you want to see him keep getting minutes to develop. But that's not. This is different from when we had a bunch of rookies and vets who you knew what they were, but you also knew what their ceiling was, and the focus should have been and was. I'm not criticizing the approach they ended up taking, but we were hyper focused, right? On is Obi getting minutes? Is Quickly getting minutes? Is Grimes? Are these guys developing? Are we able to see that? And if they're not getting the opportunity, then what are we doing? Because we're trying to max out for 40 wins. That's not where this team is anymore. This team is trying to win 4 playoff series. For that, you need as many options as possible, and you want to play the best guy. And sorry, young player development, as much as I like DOR and as much as I think he's capable and should be a contributor this year, that's not the priority over winning. And winning them playoffs. And the last thing I'll say is, realistically, they're going to mostly have a 9-man rotation in the playoffs, right? We already know what that is. You're talking about the 10th guy right now. I would assume Tyler Kolek will be out of the rotation in the playoffs with the addition of Alvarado, but you're really looking at the 5 starters plus Alvarado, Deuce, Mitch, and Shamit, right? So we're really talking about not that many minutes, and more in the regular season experimenting and off the bench, having a different look. And I will say this, right? Sohan gives you. You mentioned this with DOR. DOR is guy you're going to feel him. He's annoying to play against. Sohan is that kind of guy, and especially if you're looking at a team like Detroit, which we know likes to mix it up and try to get under people's skin, to be able to give a little bit of dose back to them, right? Or if you're playing a team like Boston and they're one of those hot shooting zones, a guy who can break the rhythm, who can who can, mess with the game a little bit and muck it up. And they've gotten a few guys like that who are annoying to play with and play against. And we talked about this, since really the Cat and McHale trade, and we didn't have Randall anymore. The way the Knicks used to be able to be a pain in the ass to play against, quite literally in terms of the physicality, in terms of the punishment they could deliver. Um, they've quietly rebuilt a lot of that. Playing Mitch more obviously helps, but Hart is returned to form, and he's not exactly that kind of player. He doesn't get into extracurricular stuff, but he plays very hard, and he's going to not let loose balls go. Then you add a guy like Jose Alvarado who can really guard 94 feet. Diawara is playing more. He's a physical defender that gets into guys. Sochan, a jack of all trades, who, having been on the other end of it, can really be annoying to play against. If you look at the guys they've surrounded Brunson and Cat with, I think they've done a nice job, and they have a lot of different options, but they have the ability to play many different ways. They can play a muck it up series. They have guys that can do that. They obviously have great offensive players. They can rebound. They can hit you on the offensive glass. They can do enough on half court defense where their offense can win. So at this point, given everything that's happened, given all the constraints they have, this is pretty much all the most you can ask for. And I think worrying about is Zohan going to take Diawara's minutes really misses the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I agree. Just to give it a little bit more, this is what these are things that Mike Brown had to say about Sohan even further. He mentioned, sorry, just trying to find the quote right here. When you look at Jeremy, you like his size right off the bat, especially for a forward. OG is of that size, but no one else is really of that size. Pointed at defensive versatility, being able to guard 1 to 5. Said good insurance if OG or Josh miss games. Then he went on to say on his minutes, I'm not 100% sure, but I do see a role for him because of the things I mentioned. I plan on trying to use him, hopefully get to a point where he's playing 1 to 5. Um, so, I think that speaks to some of what we're talking about with Sohan. In terms of the versatility is appealing, at least in terms of how he can defend. If you want to switch more, this is a guy that you'd feel comfortable in a scheme like that, especially if you're going to play without a center. So I think that's definitely part of it. He's a good rebounder for a forward, not a great one, but a good one. So if you're gonna play him and OG together at times, that's a benefit. Diawara has done a lot of good things as a rookie. Rebounding is not a strong suit of his so far. Um, so look, he's a 20-year-old kid as a rookie who's done an admirable job and honestly has been good enough to the point that I hope, that the Knicks view him, if nothing else, as a player you feel like is worth a worthwhile investment for the next 2 or 3 years moving forward to see how if he can develop further, how he develops further. That being said, he is still a work in progress. As good as he was against Boston, right? As good as he was against Philly, you know, you look at the Indiana game in between. He was not effective in that game. He didn't have an impact in that game. Um, and he was invisible, really. So like, it's not just steady, right? It's always up and down with young players, and I think the danger, and it's not a danger really when your team is in the rebuilding mode, but the danger when you're a good team is like taking the good moments and assuming those good moments will consistently show up. Um, and this isn't to say that Sohan himself is some fucking, absolute model of consistency. If he was, he wouldn't have been available on a buyout. Um, so no, it's not that, but that's really what I think, or maybe I hope is probably a better word, or my interpretation of what Mike Brown is saying is, yeah, I'm going to try and give him a chance. I'm going to give him a chance. It's not even try. I'm going to give him chances. But like these other guys who are on the fringes of the rotation, like that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be consistent every night. And I don't really have a consistent role for him planned out right now. We have to experiment, see how things go, see what works, see what doesn't, and go from there. And I think that's a completely I think that's if anything, that's the appropriate place to land. Um, you know, he's not a known quantity. Sohan, that is. He is very much a work in progress. And same can be said about Diawara. And so, if you have two of those guys, forwards with different skill sets, base skill sets anyway, um, you know, i- it behooves you to not kind of hone in on one or the other necessarily, keep an open mind and see what their different skill sets, because they do have different skill sets. Um, you know, how are they best utilized? What lineups they best utilized? What situations they best utilized in? And, have that knowledge going into the playoffs where maybe there will be moments where you need to call on one or the other. Um, and if you've never developed that, if you've never given either of them chances, that can be a problem. Obviously it would be different if Sohan came in and was like, fucking Con Knipple. Like, yeah, then you're gonna make sure that he's playing every game and like carve out a consistent role for him, and you're not gonna let a buyout candidate take minute, compete with him for minutes. That's not where Diawara is. Um, you know, can he get there? I hope so. That'd be awesome. It'd be great if Diawara wanted to be uh, a Con Knipple shooter that is also really active and good on defense. But obviously we're miles from that right now. So yeah, I think this is again, like I just find it very odd that if you were criticizing Tibbs for like the lack of this stuff, right? The lack of experimentation, the lack of willingness to try different guys, the lack of experimenting in the regular season, like you were killing the pass coach for that. It's a bit odd to me to then not kind of want to see Mike Brown take a different approach. I mean, we even did this last year, right? At the deadline, the Knicks traded Jericho Sims for Dylan Wright. And, I don't think any of us thought Dylan Wright was like the fucking answer to anything. But he probably you give him a chance earlier and maybe you would have realized earlier, like, hey, actually this guy can play really good defense for us, even though he's a little bit on the he's on the wrong side of 30. And maybe he is a better credible or more steadier ball handler right now at this point in time than Tyler Kolek or even campaign for that matter. Um, like when you and we didn't do that, right? The only time we did that was when we had injuries, or Brunson was out, and then Dylan Wright played. But like as soon as Brunson was back, right, Dylan Wright goes back to DNP CDs. So you're not experimenting with your full, even when you have a full deck, right? Um, and all of a sudden, then in the playoffs, when you kind of need to shuffle that deck, now you're guessing. Now you're just kind of like, I guess this will work, or maybe this will work. You want to get to a point where if you do have to shuffle the deck, like, because I agree with you. I think there is a 9-man rotation, um, definitely a top 8 that I suspect there, and I very strongly that is Mike Brown's top 8, right? The starters we have now, Deuce McBride, um, Shamit, and Mitchell Robinson. And maybe Alvarado plays himself into it as the ninth guy. We'll see. But I feel very strongly at full strength, those are your top 8 guys. But maybe your top 8 are struggling in a series. Maybe you need to find something else to give you an edge in a specific moment in time and against a specific look that a specific opponent is throwing against you. Whatever the case may be, you don't want to fly blind. And the only way you can't fly blind is if you try these things out in the regular season. You give it the time of day in the regular season. Maybe it costs you a game. Maybe it turns a blowout into a game that's tighter, and now you got to there's all kinds of maybes and potentialities and trade-offs to the stuff. But ultimately, what you're hoping is that the trade-offs that maybe they cost you a regular season game here or there. I mean, it's also possible they win you a regular season game here or there. But you're hoping that those short-term gains, those trade-offs you're making in the now, pay off down the line when you might be a little desperate, when you might need to find a spark. And maybe you have a better idea of what that spark can be, what can change the momentum of a series, of a game, a quarter, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm fine with this approach that they seem to be taking, or at least Mike Brown seems to be taking with Sohan. I mean, if anything, I would suspect that he probably was reasonably involved in the process. Like from the sounds of it, it to me it sounds like Mike Brown was on board with bringing in Sohan in. We have seen him close games prior to Sohan's arrival, even when Carl Towns was available or whatever. We've seen him close games with OG Anunoby at the five. So he's not averse to throwing a curveball here and there. This is a guy who played Trey Lyles the five in a playoff series in moments against Golden State to try and find an edge. So he is more experimental than Tom Thibodeau. Even if I don't think he's like crazy mad scientist or something, but I do think he's willing to try more things, and the proof is in the pudding from what we've seen this year. Um, so I think this feels, at least a little bit to me, like a personnel move, a roster decision, however you want to put it, that is shared between the front office and Mike Brown in terms of how these things work out. And look, Sohan said himself, like he came here because he thought he had a chance to play potentially, because of Mike Brown and how he coached and all these type of things. Like, well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, sports history is littered with the false promises of coaches or coaches that quickly sour on a guy that they initially wanted to bring to the team. If you don't know your Knicks history, check out Larry Brown and Steve Francis. That worked out great. But yeah, I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. Like again, Sohan, there's talent there. There's an intriguing skill set there. There's an intriguing set of physical tools there. But this is a man who was waived by the San Antonio Spurs before the end of his rookie contract. He did not return value for them in trade. They, obviously because they waived him, they didn't get anything back for him in trade. So we got to be somewhat realistic about what is the real ceiling of this player here. But weirder things have happened, and maybe he is a player who can give us an edge in moments, a spark in moments that we need in the regular season, hopefully in the playoffs, and it will all be worth it. So just changing gears a little bit. Just looking at the conference odds again, which are pretty tight. The Eastern Conference over on FanDuel. The Cavs now are at plus 360, leading the conference, or the best odds, I guess, in the conference. Then after that, the Pistons and the Knicks are tied at plus 370, and then there are the Celtics at plus 380. These odds keep fluctuating, so um, I don't think anything is set in stone. The only thing I take really out of this is that they're pricing in all four of these teams as equals effectively. I do find it interesting that two of them are in the Atlantic, two of them are in the Central, so I wonder if that has any bearing on this at all. But um, I look at this and I don't know. I thought prior to the season, I still don't really buy into Boston. I know that they added Vooch, but I think their front court is too weak. Even when Tatum comes back, there's a big drop off from what they were over the last couple years. And I know last year, obviously, Horford was on his last legs. Porzingis barely played half the time. But Cornette was a nice piece. Obviously, you had Tatum still. Um, I don't know. And even then, like their front court was a weakness against the Knicks in their loss to us. And I know Nemias Keita has been good, but I'm sorry, like Nemias Keita and Nikola Vucevic in a playoff series against the Knicks front court to me is a mismatch, and that's just pretty straightforward to me. I think even the Knicks backcourt is better than theirs. So, if you want to give the Celtics the advantage on the wings, fair enough. But two of the three departments, you're kind of looking at a pretty decisive advantage for the Knicks to me. So I didn't really consider them a contender. I mean, I definitely didn't consider them a contender coming into the season. And for as good as they've been, I still have a lot of questions about it. Um, the Pistons, I don't want to. I don't think we agree on them. But I also feel like I don't think their advantage against the Knicks has anything to do with like the talent. Like I don't think they have some talent advantage on the Knicks. I do think they present challenges in terms of pure athleticism and size. And that's not just for the Knicks. That's just for most teams. That's a real advantage for them. I think that's why they've been one of the best defenses in the league. It's why they're the best paint defense in the league. It's why they're one of the best in the league at generating turnovers. Um, and that's just what it is. But prior to the season, and I still think now, like as good as the Pistons are, yeah, I don't know that you're getting to a finals, and certainly not winning one with just Cade Cunningham as your like one guy that can create offense. I don't believe that. I don't buy it. And honestly, that's not even so much like a knock on Cade thing as much as like I don't know how valuable that is for anybody. I mean, the Knicks might be in a similar boat, but they have better complementary offensive talent pretty decisively to me. Um, and in terms of a team that like SGA did it last year, as far as I saw it. And again, that required them to be the best defense in basketball. So, if your path is be the best defense and have one guy that can create awesome offense, the problem is Cade doesn't create awesome offense. So I don't I still think the Knicks have an advantage there. Not an easy series, but I think the Knicks would win that. Um Cleveland's the one team prior to the season starting. Like I still felt pretty good about them as far as being a contender? At least I think I did. I don't know. I don't remember what my thoughts were at the time. I could be totally wrong on that. Maybe I was shitting on them. Um, but I did think like some of the backlash, deserved backlash to them losing the way they did to the Pacers, probably was a little bit extreme and probably did a disservice to one, how good they were over the course of last season, and two, just like, yeah, like injuries are real and guys missing games are real. And that can be a reason why you lose a series that you probably shouldn't have, at least not in the fashion they did. And, then the season starts and Cleveland does what they do. And you're like, okay, maybe I was wrong. And they actually were a fraud all this whole time. But they got their shit together. And then I think they made a couple trades that make them a better team. I do think Harden makes them better because he'll play games. I've talked about this a lot. And I think Schroeder and Ellis are good acquisitions, especially when you're moving DeAndre Hunter on. So, like, I think they're a better team now than they were to start the year. I think they have better depth. Um, the two questions you have about them are, I guess three questions would be, is this the time that James Harden can kind of get it done in a decisive moment in the playoffs? Like, I know he's had some big games here and there, but in general, his career, he's come up short in these big games, big moments. Um, their front court, I think, can still be bullied. I don't they're really it's kind of weird. Like they're obviously a very good front court with Allen and Mobley, but it's hard to say that anybody walks into a series against them and is like scared to face those guys. I certainly am not. And then like they just don't really have wings. I know Jalen Tyson's been really good, but that's about it. So um I I I don't know how I feel about all of these other teams individually. I think I go back and forth on them a lot. But what I do feel is I thought prior to the season the Knicks were the best team in the East. I still think that they are the best team in the East. I think probably even more strongly they're the best team in the East because I believe getting Alvarado is a pretty fairly decent. I think it's a pretty big deal. The reporting on Deuce McBride, at least what we heard from Ian Begley, that he'd be back in 6 to 8 weeks, is very encouraging because it did not, at least it wasn't reported as he will be reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks. It was that he would be back in 6 to 8 weeks. He's been out now for 2 weeks post surgery. So, now you're looking at 4 to 6 weeks. It's a month and a half. That's not bad. And really, look, if he came back in a month and a half, you'd have, you know, all of April leading up to the playoffs to kind of play himself back into shape. That'd be pretty ideal. Um, so that piece is nice. And then, yeah, like I feel better about their depth now than I did to start the year. Maybe I'm foolish, but I do think Diawara just being a guy that you feel like, yeah, this guy might be able to give you some juice in 4 or 5 minutes here or there. He might be able to take on a defensive matchup that maybe somebody else is struggling with and slow down another team. And you don't feel totally scared about him taking an open three, right? Just given the way he shot the ball. So that's something. And Sohan, like, look, he's not perfect, but you know, if you just look at, for example, if I were to like tell you the Pacers roster from last year, and mind you, this is a team that I think it's fair to say like the general consensus was depth was you know, a strength of theirs and a reason that they were able to kind of get advance as far as they could. Here are their top guys last year in the playoffs in terms of total minutes. All right, so I'll just read off their top 11. Halliburton, Siakam, Nemhard, Turner, Neesmith. Then we get to 6. Obi Toppin, TJ McConnell, Matherin, and then it's Ben Shepard, Thomas Bryant, Jarris Walker. I think it's safe to say that we would agree that Ben Shepard, Thomas Bryant, Jarris Walker are not guys that you pencil in the rotation every night and that you're particularly scared of as impact players. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
And that's kind of where I'm like, okay, like if our 9 to 11 guys, right, are in some order, Alvarado, Sohan, Diawara, like I think that's comparable. I think that's comparable. And it's like, do the Knicks have the best depth in the entire league? No, I don't think they do. But I do think that if they're healthy, now like you like your top 8 guys, and then your 9, 10, 11 guys, those are guys that aren't going to play every night. And you kind of mix and match them and slot them in where you can, slot them in where you think it suits them, and you feel good about it. And I do think that's where the Knicks are. And so like I feel better about their rotation now than I did going into the season. Especially given the way Yabusele's brief stint in New York panned out. And I think, I don't feel the Pistons really didn't do anything at the trade deadline. Like I don't mind the Herder thing for them. I think it's like fine, take a flyer on Herder, move up in the draft, 7 fucking spots. It's like sounds good. Um, I already outlined why I think the Cavs actually did get better, but not so much better that I think I feel any different about them really. 'Cause I have this, I ultimately have the same concerns about them that I had prior to the trade. It's like, okay, you're really talented, but like, I don't know if I trust you. Sorry, don't know if I trust your one of your primary ball handlers. Don't know if I trust Donovan Mitchell. Don't know if I trust your front court. And then the Celtics, like they effectively did nothing, and they're still preying on, that their long shot is Tatum comes back and he's fully healthy, and like, look, Tatum's a hell of a player, but we beat him. We beat them last year with Tatum. I mean, I guess you can't guarantee the Knicks win the series even if Tatum stays healthy, but you're up 3-1. You still had a game 6 at home on your home floor. You had won 3 of 4 against them. Like, it's not, at the very least, you could say that the Knicks showed that they could beat a more talented Celtics team or be competitive against more talented Celtics team with the Tatum that wasn't recovering from one of the most grueling injuries that you could possibly have in professional sports. And yeah, like that's their team is good, well coached, really good at winning the margins, which to me it feels like they are a team that is maximized to get the most out of what they have in the regular season and not so much in the playoffs. Because I really don't think any other team in the league focuses on the margins right now in season the way the Celtics do. And yeah, so I don't know. I look at those odds and I get why they're jumbled up and whatever, but to me, the Knicks are still the favorite, and if people want to put that pressure on them, I think it's deserved. I think they need to embrace it. And I think like fans of the team ourselves, like I don't think we should shy away from it. It's reality. Like the Knicks were the favorite coming into the season, and nothing that has happened now, leading now that the trade deadline is passed, in my opinion anyway, really has moved me off of that opinion.
Sorry, which opinion?
Huh?
Sorry, which opinion? Can you repeat what you just said?
Um, just that I don't think the Knicks should still be the favorite to win the conference.
Yeah, I think there's really only one team that can stop the Knicks, and they play at Madison Square Garden. So um, I think they absolutely should still be the favorites for a variety of reasons. They have the most talent. I think they're the of the contending teams, depending on how Tatum comes back, they have the best number one option. I would also say of the contending teams, they have the best number two option. I would say among the contending teams, they have the most depth. I'd say among the contending teams, they have the best starting five. Um, yeah, I absolutely think they had a 2-9 stretch, which I know we disagree on this. I think a lot of that was boredom, and it's something I think that people, when they overreact to this team coming out flat and looking at other teams, it's very different the first couple of years under Tibbs when they were playing every night as hard as they could. When you've been to the playoffs 5, 6 times, last 3 years, this will be the third year in a row, barring another collapse, where they get 50 wins. And then the year before that, they had 47 and went to the second round. And after they got Josh Hart on a 53 win pace. This is a team that's been contending for a while. This is a team that knows they are going to be judged on April. They could win 70 games in the regular season. It would not matter. They're going to be judged on what's happens in April, May, or hopefully June. So when I look at the other teams, there's reasons for concern. Sure. You look at Boston, if Tatum comes back healthy, that is a team that, look, the Knicks won last year. I think they're capable of, they have real advantages in the front court, but Boston is probably the one team that can claim to have the best player in a series against the Knicks. And Jaylen Brown has played very well this year too. If Tatum's healthy, maybe I change that. But I'd still favor the Knicks beat them last year. And they have better advantages in the front court. Vooch can go 5 out and cause some interesting things, but the Knicks should once again be able to dominate on the glass. They'll hopefully be playing better lineups. It's not dismissive. I think Boston is healthy. Tatum, Boston is easily the largest threat. Cleveland, we'll see Atkinson in the playoffs, but he's a good coach. They run a dynamic offense. I think, one thing, the whole narrative of Mitchell really struggling against the Knicks, particularly in the playoffs, or struggling to outplay Brunson, he is a player who's shown that he can really go off against the Knicks and get hot in a hurry. Harden is a guy who's historically had success against the Knicks. And look, as much as I don't think Mitchell and Harden can play together, they don't really, that's the wrong way of phrasing it. They don't really amplify each other. Either of them is a particularly great off-ball player. Harden gives you some more size. And a lot of those possessions at the end of games are in the playoffs. The game does slow down, and it's not the worst thing in the world to have two take turns type guys. We saw Oklahoma City, for example, with Westbrook and Durant. That showed out a lot more in the playoffs when it devolves to a lot of that anyway, even if you have kind of a more ball movement oriented system. And then, our thoughts are pretty different on Detroit. I think that's a very extreme example of, just when you have in the regular season, when not every team is going to bring it every night. And if you've only been a good team for 1 year, and you're trying to lock up the 1 seed and prove yourself in a way that the Knicks just aren't, it's going to look like they're a better team. Are there size concerns? Yes, but the much bigger concern is they are a young team that doesn't have a reliable second creator. I would argue in the playoffs, their top creator is unproven. They can put the defense should travel for the playoffs. They should be tough to score against. But the Knicks have many different ways to attack. They took the Knicks to 6 games last year, and that was a series that, frankly, if you were coaching, I don't think the Knicks would have been much worse off. Probably a little bit better off because you would have played deuce. So do I think the Knicks should be the favorite? Absolutely. Do I think the Knicks can absolutely get in their way and not do that? Sure. And if they don't make it, I think you would have to look at 2 things. If they lose to any of those teams and they're healthy, you'd have to look at coaching. Where are they playing the starting lineup that is not the most effective, and are they playing at heavy minutes? Are they giving the right guys minutes? Was there some kind of scheme diversity? Because that is an area that should be a huge advantage, especially over Detroit, because we've seen Bickerstaff in the playoffs. We've seen he couldn't outcoach Tibbs. So Mike Brown should absolutely be able to throw things that Bickerstaff should have no counter for. You should be able to leave multiple guys on that team open. It would be very, very inexcusable to lose. based on that. Or if they lose, if Brown does try stuff and they still lose, then you have to look at the guys in the locker room. And I do think at that point, you'd have to look at, if you can't beat this team, you're not beating Oklahoma City. You're not beating Boston healthy next year. You're not beating Indiana when they're back to full strength. So what are we doing here? I don't believe it'll come to that, and I do think the Knicks can stop themselves. The Knicks, they do have some bad tendencies in terms of Brunson becoming too ball dominant at times. Cat on defense can be exploited a little bit, although Cleveland is really the team I'm most worried about when it comes to that. I actually think Cat held up pretty well against Boston last year and Detroit. So yeah, I absolutely think the Knicks should be the favorites out of the East, and really, I think they should be. I would pick them in a series against any team besides Oklahoma City in the league. And now you just add more depth, and then they just have so many different ways to beat you. They have to make that come to fruition, and a lot of that is on Mike Brown, and there isn't a ton of time left to really have it firing on all cylinders. But you said yourself that besides the 2-9 stretch, they've been awesome. And I'm frankly not going to put too much into that, just based on the fact that, that this is a team that's focus is going to ebb and wane a little bit more than other teams. And we've seen this, right? The first year Tibbs got here, they went 3-1 against Atlanta, and then that dried up in the playoffs. We've seen it against, Miami was 7th or 8th seed. And in the playoffs, the Knicks were banged up and they were outcoached. But yeah, like a lot of the things they relied on, isolation, rebounding, Miami was able to neutralize Mitchell Robinson in that series. So, I still think this is the best in the East.
Yeah, I think it's the best team in the East. I don't agree that if you lose the Pistons, then you automatically need to blow it up. I think that's. I'm not going to debate this with you.
I would be very, very pessimistic they're ever getting past that point then, because next year this will be better.
I don't really agree with any of that. I think year-to-year shifts are very significant. I think you can make trades that aren't blow it up trades. Do you have to make significant trades? Sure, but I think there's a very big difference between blow it up and maybe you got to do something. I also don't really buy this whole the Celtics next year are going to definitely be better. Why? Why are the Celtics definitely going to be better? What because they're okay, Tatum's going to come back. We beat them with fucking Tatum.
You mean better than us or better than they are now? Because right now they're right at the same standing as the Knicks. I think the Knicks are a better team in the playoffs.
You can't argue that the Pistons aren't what their record is and then use the record to be like, well, they're right where we are now.
They're also they aren't experiencing that we need to try hard every game thing. But more than that,
the Celtics are trying hard every game.
I think they are, but it's not from the same place. It's it's repeatable stuff where they have a very talented roster. Brown has risen to the moment.
I don't think their roster is that talented. Do you watch them when they played us? I thought there was that's like a joke to me.
The front court is not as good.
Their backcourt fucking sucks. Their backcourt is two guys.
I would probably take Jaylen Brown in a playoff series over.
You got Pritchard. You got Derek White. I will take the Knicks backcourt. I'd take Brunson on his own over both those guys, but I think Knicks backcourt over them, especially if you give me Deuce McBride.
So you're comparing to the Knicks, but what I'm saying is the Knicks played them last year, and it was a competitive series. And if they get Tatum back, so if you want to say,
but their backcourt isn't the same. They don't have Drew. They don't have Drew. They don't have they lost Porzingis. They lost Horford, and sure, were those guys as good as they were the year before and they won the championship? No, they weren't. But that's kind of the point. That's why they fell off.
You would also expect
they haven't replaced that talent. They have not replaced those guys. They have not replaced Drew Holiday. They have not replaced Porzingis, and they have not replaced Horford.
So you want to say the Knicks can still beat Boston next year? Probably, especially if they likely would have to go through Boston and get to the Eastern Conference Finals this year. I would say if they were to, but I would say Indiana's probably going to be good next year again, and the Knicks haven't overcome them, and that is one where on talent they're pretty damn close. As much as I would prefer Brunson over Halliburton, I can it's 2 years in a row. Halliburton, especially last year when it was at full strength, Halliburton's team won the series. And we expect Detroit to get better, right? And then there's the Spurs are coming every year in the West. So I would be very if you don't say you blow it up, maybe blowing it up is too extreme. I would be very pessimistic about the Knicks winning a title.
The end point of his logic is almost like the Knicks, if they don't win the championship, they should blow it up. That's
No,
like
if
that's
they
one
lose to
win.
Oklahoma City, even if they lose to Cleveland, I could see it. But if they lose, I mean, one, I don't expect Detroit.
So what if they how about this? What if they lost to Cleveland, but then Cleveland lost to Detroit?
I mean, I would have to look at why they lost to Cleveland. But I would say that probably does tell you some things about either the roster or the way that Brown is coaching. And look, you don't want to fire two coaches 2 years in a row. But I'm saying if they don't get to the finals when they're clearly the best team this year, and I think it is clear, that would, I mean, we don't know how it's gonna. The process matters, right? How it happens. The failure modes I see, I could actually see Cleveland legitimately just Mitchell and Harden just having too many, causing too many problems in the Knicks defense. Maybe that tells you that there's structural integrity issues that are not. If you can't handle those two guys, you're not handling SGA and Jalen Williams under any circumstances. That might tell you something structural about the roster. It also might tell you that Brown wasn't creative. My guess is if they lost to Detroit, it would largely be because Brown wasn't creative enough. So it depends on how it happens. But if it's just this is what we're going to go forward with, and they don't make the NBA Finals this year, it would create a huge degree of skepticism. Which, let's face it, I think a lot of Knicks fans already have. My question is, what if the Knicks are actually good? Because I think they are. And if I'm wrong and they're not, and they lose to Detroit, then that's where a lot of people seem to be right now. And then you do have to think about major moves. Maybe it's not blow it up. Maybe it's trade Cat. Maybe it's trade Mikal. Maybe it's say, hey, get a new coach. But that should set off big time alarm bells at Madison Square Garden if they stay healthy and can't get to the finals. That's where I'm at.
Maybe I don't know. I just think I think you're way too dismissive of Detroit, and I just don't agree with it. Um, Moving on from that conversation. Uh, you mentioned Mike Brown. We've talked a lot about Mike Brown on this podcast because you tend to talk about the coach of your basketball team. We did that when Tibbs was here. We will continue to do that when Mike Brown is here. Uh, do you? I guess we're at the. It's on the midway point. It's actually the fucking. We're 2/3 of the way through the season. Um, what from Mike Brown have you seen that you like? And what again, moving into the final third of the season here, what have you seen from him that you would like to see improved or that has you concerned? Um, I guess what is your evaluation of him 2/3 the way through the season here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that 2-9 stretch. So let's start with the good. I think they have. Um, you can see they're trying to diversify the offense. Um, you know, outside of that 2-9 stretch, they're playing with more pace. They're having other players initiate. He's willing to reach into the bench more. Probably we wanted DOR to play more soon, but he got there. And he's been willing to pull guys in and out, right? So Kolek was playing, then he wasn't, but he went back to him. And when Clarkson has struggled, he went away from him too. Um, I do think they've been experimenting with uh, different things on defense more than last year, right? They switch sometimes. They're still probably best in drop, but there's been a little bit more experimentation, even some trapping. Um, and I think he's been willing to try lineups that I don't think we would have tried in the past. Like, I don't think either of us loved the three guard lineup, but I like that he's willing to do it. I like personally that Brunson Alvarado is not going to be off the table. I like that they. I think that Brunson has reacted, and he had that game against Indiana where he went too ISO heavy. I think the next game he took like 6 shots. So it seems like they are adapting. The team is learning from its mistakes and getting better. The reasons for concern, that 2-9 stretch was ugly. And I think we both talked about it, right? That he hasn't gone to bat for Cat. Cat has not had a great season. That does fall on the coach because this is a guy. I mean, the 3-pointers might not have anything to do with Mike Brown. But we've seen Cat be very frustrated. We've seen him not get calls. We haven't seen Mike Brown get a tech. And we've seen him kind of put it on Cat in the post game. And you can hold players accountable, but you have to hold all your players accountable equally. And we don't see the same energy, if Mikal Bridges has a listless game or if Brunson is ball hogging too much. And that's a criticism we've had of Tibbs in the past, that we thought that he should be doing that to Randall more. I also think I still think that the best starting lineup for this team is Brunson, Deuce, Bridges, OG, and Cat. Hart is playing really well, and especially with Deuce out, I wouldn't bench him for a guy like, let's say, Shamit, just for going 5 out. And I think Brown does change a little bit more and is willing to, doesn't stick with, within a game, the stints aren't quite as long as with Tibbs. But I do worry about lineup optimization, because you probably either want to be going 5 out or too big most of the time. And it might not be hard. It could be Bridges needs to come out earlier, and we've talked about it. Brunson, Deuce, Hart is one of the best 3-man lineups. Are you going to keep pushing that button when it matters? So I'm still some reservations about lineups. There's more flexibility there than Tibbs, which is a good thing, but I don't know that he's converging, especially quickly enough on the optimal buttons. I don't know if he has a sense really, especially, and I haven't seen in a playoff series, and it's been a while since I've watched a Mike Brown team play in a playoff series. And I mean, a lot, like, I don't know how much you can take from how a guy coaches when he has LeBron James. But I don't know, right? Like, when he picks a lineup that works, is that him calculating and pushing the right button, or is he a guy that pushes a lot of buttons and whatever sticks? That's a good thing to have early in the season. I don't know if by the playoffs, I hope he has a very clear idea of what buttons he's going to push and when. It doesn't have to be as simplified maybe as Tibbs, but there has to be a logical set of processes that lead him to these points, and he needs to be right more often than not. Because I think that is an advantage. I look at the potential playoff opponents. Missoula is a very good coach. I think Tibbs got the better of him last year, and he made some mistakes, like hack-a-shacking Mitch, but he's a good coach. Atkinson has Cleveland playing a pretty difficult style to defend. I'm not worried about Bickerstaff at all. But if you're right about the Pistons, then Brown needs to outcoach Bickerstaff, because that should be an advantage for the Knicks. So overall, I would say it's the same grade I'd give the Knicks as a team, probably a B minus. There's things what we wanted to see that we have seen. We probably want to see it a little bit more, and we now need to see them get to that next level where, okay, you've experimented, you have an idea, we have data on what works, what doesn't. So starting to hone in on what works and deploying, even that doesn't mean you narrow down and stop doing things that quote unquote hasn't worked, but making sure they're deployed very strategically and tactically. And two, I think that the vibes in the locker room certainly seem to be a lot better. I think bringing in a guy like Alvarado is great for that. But I think another reason the Knicks might, if the Knicks don't make it, one reason you could point to is that, frankly, they're not getting the best version of Karl-Anthony Towns or Brunson for most of the season. I'm really not worried about Brunson at all in the playoffs. But yeah, I'm a little concerned about Cat, and I do. Some of that could be health related. Some of that could be just, he's aging, and maybe Prez has been on this. It seems to have lost a step in terms of being able to blow by guys. But handling, not getting calls, not letting your effort drop, getting back on defense when you fall down, and having his back, and having him feel energized like my coach has his back. That is the other thing that's a bit of a question mark for me with Mike Brown.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I definitely have concerns with some of the things. Look, I will be honest. The 2-9 stretch they had in the middle of the season, I don't know what was going on. I don't buy that they just weren't trying or didn't care. I mean, that was part of the issue. Why was that the issue though? Because teams have nights where they don't care all the time, or they don't show up, or they're not maxing out. Like, that's not really a crisis. It becomes a crisis when you have 11 games in a row.
And it was extended, and that Dallas game
like
was where I really got concerned, because
it was the Dallas game was obviously kind of like, okay, what the fuck's going on here? But they had a horrible effort against the Kings, and they came back the next game against the Warriors, and it was like, okay, they're trying, but like the Warriors are still scoring at will in the paint, and the Warriors never score in the paint. Like that's weird. Whatever. You don't need to go through the whole fucking list, but the point is, there are a lot of these games where you're just like, what the fuck is this? Um, and and look, players got to own their own shit, and they do like that. We can talk about coaching all we want, but like players weren't playing well enough to just point the finger at Mike Brown and call him out for like being the sole reason for that stretch of games. That being said, like I didn't love the way he conducted himself during that stretch. And I bet if you gave him truth serum and asked him, he would admit that he didn't conduct himself the best way during that stretch. Um, he went out of his way after the Golden State game to defend Draymond Green after he committed a flagrant foul on Karl Towns. I thought that came across very poorly. He had repeated and that was just one incident, but he had repeated things with Cat that were like weird and not great, and you could kind of sense there was tension there. Um, I don't know what happened there. I didn't love it. I didn't love some of his decision making. I still have questions about his decision making, but like you're gonna have questions about any coach's decision making. There's never been a coach in the history of the NBA where the fans of that team were like, I love every 95% everything this guy does. I love that's not
And
realistic.
lineups are often the lowest hanging fruit, right? So
Yeah, and so like I just don't. I don't think that's a particularly galling criticism. Um, but I do come back to like the starting lineup has been the same. And to give credit to the starting lineup, it has been much better again after that 2-9 stretch. They played actual good basketball. Now the schedule is eased up and blah blah blah, but like, they're that group together now. Um, it's not.
can I interrupt just on that note? Um,
Yeah.
I think both everyone Hart is much better. Just he's been playing much better this year on both ends, especially on defense. Is it fair to say that he may not be the biggest issue with that lineup?
I mean, I have not thought he was the biggest issue of that lineup for a while.
I mean, is it Bridges, or is it just that they can't go 5 out? Because if you say they can't go 5 out with that lineup, that really makes it hard. But it's tough to put the blame on him just how well he's playing, right?
Um, I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's a 5 out thing. But yeah, it hasn't been like I think it's probably Bridges or like I don't know. I think it's more like a Bridges and an Obi problem. They don't seem to get the best out of each other for whatever reason. I couldn't tell you why. I think you're guessing, or anybody's guessing really. Um, so I don't know. I just think that's ultimately what it is. That those two guys, for whatever reason, they don't get the best out of each other. And then with Hart in there with them, it exacerbates some of the issues that they themselves have. Um, that group though now has played 249 minutes this season. So that's Towns, Anunoby, Hart, Bridges, and Brunson. 249 minutes. They have 116.8 offensive rating, 108.8 defensive rating. It's a +8, obviously, net rating. It's a really strong lineup. It's a good lineup. It's not it's not their best one by net rating, but like your samples are kind of small after that. So, the next best lineup is Towns, Hart, Bridges, Brunson, Deuce. That group has played 118 minutes together. They have 132.8 offensive rating, 116.8 defensive rating. So
So
plus 16 net.
That's Deuce in place of Bridges, right?
No, Deuce in place of Anunoby.
Gotcha.
Deuce in place of Hart. This is an interesting one. This is Towns, Anunoby, Bridges, Brunson, Deuce. They played 91 minutes together. They actually have a minus 1.4 net rating, 126.9 offensive rating, 128.3 defensive rating. Again, these are all small samples, even with the top group. It's not a massive sample like we saw last year.
But
But
it
that's
lends
actually okay
credence
to
to
me
your
because really what you're trying to do is find, I think, the smaller pairings, like the 3-man, the 4-man, 5-man, those kind of groupings are usually better signals for you. So whatever. To bring it back to Mike Brown, yeah, like I don't know what to make of that because much was made of you know that starting lineup and needing to experiment and blah blah and like I think he's doing okay. The fact that it feels like he landed back on last year's starting lineup because he couldn't quite sell Josh Harden coming off the bench, and you're not going to bench Bridges, you're not going to bench Anunoby, you're not going to bench Brunson, you're not going to bench Carl Anthony Towns. Um, it is what it is. It almost kind of forced itself there. To like you mentioned, to Josh Hart's credit, he's been really good this year, so he's not gotten back in the starting lineup and you know kind of chilled out since then. He's played hard and he's played well. And yes, just like the rest of the team during that 2-9 stretch, he wasn't great, and he missed a little bunch of that too. Must be said. But I think whatever their issues have been, he's not really at the central core of much of it. Um, what I will give Brown credit for is I think this group of guys, this group of players, I think they are very professional. I don't think they're like big fucking, I don't think there's much off court drama with them. I don't think you're worried about any of that stuff. I don't think you're worried about them, leaking shit from the locker room and it becoming a huge public story or anything along those lines. I don't. But I also think that they're maybe not as easy a group to manage as you would think on the surface, right? We saw last year that Tibbs had issues reaching them, and Tibbs some of that's just on him and the way he manages teams, the way he manages personalities. Um, but I think Mike Brown is probably experiencing some of the same stuff. Like he tried to change the starting lineup, right? He tried to change it, and then he had to go back to last year's starting lineup. I think in part because he probably realized, like, okay, Josh is actually kind of like whether he is whether that is my best 5-man lineup or not, whether he is my fifth best player or not, whether whatever I think, I gotta also be able to sell the fucking thing, right? I gotta be able to sell it. I have to be able to get buy-in from the locker room. And if this is gonna be a problem for me to sell to Josh Hart, then I'm better off biting the bullet here, making it my starting lineup, and then look, I'm not Tibbs, right? I am gonna make substitutions earlier in halves and quarters and mix and match more over the course of 48 minutes. So I can manage the totality of that decision much better than Tom Thibodeau maybe did. Um, And I think when you think about all of that, like that he's walking in and look, this is a team of guys that they've done a lot in the league, right? Brunson's now been an All NBA player 2 years in a row. Karl Anthony Towns has made multiple All NBA teams. Mikal Bridges has played in NBA Finals. OG Anunoby was on a team that won the finals. I mean, granted, he didn't play in it, but he was on a team that played the finals. He's been on a team. He's played in Eastern Conference Finals prior to that, if I'm not mistaken. He's played in big time playoff series after that, right? He's played in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Like these are experienced players. Josh Hart now has been a starter for a year and a half and started in the conference finals, been vital to many Knicks playoff victories, series victories, and individual game victories. Um, you know, Even Mitchell Robinson, like he's not like the young developing guy anymore, right? He's like this guy's like an experienced veteran who's been vital to their team in playoff victories. Juice McBride is the young guy of that group, and like you look at, he's really not that young. And again, he's now been through two kind of like playoff runs with this team. He's done shit in those playoff runs too. He's not just been kind of hanging out playing 5-6 minutes a game. Like he's been a contributor. He's had big moments. He's had moments that have helped his team win games. And you look at that, and I don't know how, maybe I think it just is a harder group to coach than it might seem on the surface. And not because I think those guys are like malcontents or divas or whatever, but there is a certain level of like, look, man, we've done a lot of shit here. And, you know, can you sell what you want to me? Sure, but it's a give and take, right? I'm gonna adjust to you, but you've got to adjust to us and us as individual players as well. And I think that's been a process for Mike Brown. Um, and I think he's doing a better job of it now than, and maybe there'll still be ups and downs at various points, but I think the Karl Anthony Towns thing has resolved itself to some degree. The going the trade deadline passing has helped, but I think even before that, it felt like he was getting his shit back together. Mikal Bridges has picked it up recently. Obviously, he talked about it very publicly after a game when they beat the Raptors. OG Anunoby has bounced back to his best form. Josh Hart's been great. Like, so things are rounding out, and I think he deserves credit for that. But you can't just give him the credit for things rounding out. It is a concern, and it is a mark against him that it felt like he dropped the ball during that 2-9 stretch, both tactically and as a leader of the locker room at various points. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like if I was giving him a letter grade for the season so far, I'd probably say B plus. Sounds about right for him. But it hasn't been perfect. And you know, if I were to tell you like, or if you were to tell me that, I don't think it's a lock that I guess that he pushes the Knicks further than Tom Thibodeau did. I don't think it's a lock. Because as much as criticism I gave Tom Thibodeau, and I stand by all of it, really, um, he did good things too. And ultimately, like you have to win games, and you have to win playoff games, you have to win playoff series. And look, the underlying metrics for the Knicks for where they are this season, at the same point in time as they were last year, they're better, right? They're better in many categories across the board. I don't want to bore you with those. So I do think that despite the record, I think they're a game behind last year's pace at the same exact point in the season. Um, while the record is similar, I feel better about this team as far as what it's capable of going into the playoffs. Um, and for that, I do think you have to give credit to Mike Brown. So yeah, like if I was giving him a letter grade, B plus sounds about right. Um, and yeah, look, I also think like this is probably isn't talked about a lot, but I think it's worth mentioning. There's a lot of focus, obviously, given to his relationship with Karl Anthony Towns and how Towns has struggled to adapt at times, and maybe Mike Brown needs to do a better job of adapting to him. And that's all well and good, and I think that's fair both ways. I also think like it's been an adjustment for Jalen Brunson because you know this is a guy who had the ball in his hands basically for however long he wanted for the last 3 years under Tom Thibodeau, right? Like he had carte blanche to do whatever, and I think Mike Brown No, I think Mike Brown does want to get him off the ball more. That was obviously a thing that was talked about a ton earlier in the season. I think that um, there have been moments when Jalen Brunson's been really good about operating the way Mike Brown wants him to. And I think there are times where, and maybe that's because other guys are struggling or other guys are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. That he has reverted back to like I got to do this myself ball, and I haven't loved all of that. And I still think his kind of like comfort in and trust more than anything of get off the ball. And at some point, if I run the actions and I run them with purpose and I run them hard, um, the ball will find me again. And I will get a better look because of that. And if I don't get a better look, I can open up looks for other guys off of because of the attention that I command. And I think there's still a push and pull with that. I don't think he's always comfortable operating that way. I think you see that definitely come to kind of like a four at the end of games, right? I mean that Indiana game before the break, I think was an example down the stretch of him kind of reverting. But um, that's what you use the regular season for, and that's why development, as a player, as a team, is never linear. There's ups and downs, and there's ebbs and flows. So, um, to bring it back to Mike Brown, like I think that's also something that he's had to probably manage and like consistently sell and message to Jalen Brunson, like, hey, like, obviously you can ISO and score on anybody, but like we need you to sometimes not lean into that as much because we need to help. You need to help other guys get going. You need to be um, focus on that a little bit more too, and not just get other guys specifically going, but get the team going, get the team in motion, get the team flowing offensively. And I think the best moments of this season, you can feel the difference of how the offense is operating versus how it's not. And the defense has been good. Look, they had really bizarre stretches of horrible play. Yeah, they were 29th or whatever in the league for a month in defensive rating, but they're 10th now. Over the course of 2/3 of the season, they are 10th in defensive rating. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, that speaks for itself. Like, That's to me pretty much what the upper echelon potential of this group is like if you can get into that bottom of the top 10 range, it's pretty good. Like, I think that's where the Knicks ceiling is defensively overall. And, you know, have they developed different concepts of how to defend, icing more, forcing guys to the middle versus forcing them to the on the baseline sidelines. Those are things that they have done. They've doubled more. I don't think their doubles have been very effective at times, but it is useful to have that in your kind of bag. We've seen them try zone. We've seen them try different things, which I think is useful and is good and speaks to Mike Brown being a little bit more willing to experiment with stuff. But anyways, yeah, like it's not all been perfect. There have been ups and downs, but it's hard to sit here and not say he's done a good job. And look, we talk about the record all we want, and the record is what it is, right? The 35-20. They won the cup, and like whatever you think about the cup, whatever I think about the cup, whatever anybody thinks about the cup, it's very obvious the players on the Knicks themselves put value on the cup. It's very obvious to me the teams that were playing, especially once you got to the knockout stages of the cup, were very invested in the results of those games. Um, you know, it's not the same thing as the NCAA tournament. I'm not saying it's the same stakes or stage as that, but they were higher stakes games, and you could feel that in those games. And the Knicks succeeded in those games. They won the cup, and that win doesn't go on their record, but it certainly counts for Mike Brown. It certainly is a feather in his cap, especially because we know last year and we knew every year under Tom Thibodeau that the Knicks definitely gave a shit about the cup. They 100% cared about the cup. So for him to actually win it in his first season and win it, like let's not forget, they beat an Orlando team who was viewed as like that's a bad matchup for the Knicks, right? Orlando's viewed as a bad matchup for the Knicks. They beat them, and then they beat the Spurs after they really manhandled OKC. They beat the Spurs. They came back from the Spurs, or they came back on the Spurs, and it was a really really impressive victory. They win by 11 points, 124-113. Like these are good wins, and they're wins in situations that I think are good for your team to develop in, get comfortable in. So yeah, like I think we can look at the record and all that stuff, but like the cup should be mentioned. I think that's a real achievement for him. It's obviously not the achievement you want. And look, I'm not delusional. If the Knicks lost in the first round of the playoffs, I don't think either of us would be sitting here like, yeah, look, they lost in the first round, but they did win the NBA Cup, so who can say that this season was really a failure? Like, no, nobody's going to say that. But the cup was real. It was a meaningful moment for them in the season as a group, and they took advantage of it. And Mike Brown deserves credit for that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're pretty much it's the same thing, right? I think the next step is it's great that he's experimented. Can you push the right button at the right time? Right? Do you move from that exploration to exploitation stage? But yeah, we shouldn't undersell the cup, and we shouldn't undersell the fact that they've had some legitimately. They just beat Philadelphia by fucking what was it? 55 points?
49.
49 points. On the road, obviously there's going to be a heavy Knick presence there, but a second game of a back to back. That's been a good team. That's been a team that some people, I mean, according to Bill Simmons, that's like a marquee matchup if the Knicks play the Sixers. And maybe they're pissed from the night before, right? They lost the game, but we kind of want to see that a little bit more. That was what was really concerning, by the way, for me with that Dallas game, is they've gone on the stretch. Okay, now you have a game where you should be favored to win. This isn't a contending team. Cooper Flag is really good, but this is a game you should win comfortably. And not only did they not win comfortably, or comfortably might be pushing, right? You're struggling. I get it, but you should be competitive and you should win. And if you lose in a close game, you're in a slump. They didn't show up. They showed up against Philly, and I don't know if they were extra pissed or they've beaten Denver. They've racked up some good wins. They've beaten Cleveland, right? This early season, Cleveland had its issues. I do think, the more you look at it, you look at what Darius Garland has given Cleveland in the playoffs. Like Harden, in theory, is a really big upgrade there. But yeah, I mean, I think I would say B- because they've like basically met expectations, and that's basically what you can ask for. I would say my optimism for the playoffs is pretty much the same. It's more optimistic than if we had brought Tibbs back, but it's pretty much the same as what I expected, that they would try more stuff. I wish it converged a little bit more on certain things. I think that 2-9 stretch ultimately does not look great, and that impacts my grade of him. And now it's cautious optimism, and let's see, can he start to really, if he might be against Eric Spoelstra in a playoff series, right? Is he going to be able to push the right buttons at the right time? Um, you know, he's going to, he's going to face Missoula. Can he give us those advantages? That's what remains to be seen. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, and I think it's going to be this simple, right? If Brunson and Cat play up to their potential, the Knicks should be able to win the East. Last year, I think they played pretty damn close. They ran into a good team, and they had a heartbreaking loss in game one. But I'm not going to take anything away from Indiana. I do think Carlisle outcoached Tibbs, but I also think they have a roster that poses unique issue. I actually worry more about that kind of roster because it can kind of neutralize Mitch, and because we know Cat has issues in space, and the Knicks' biggest thing is offense. They're probably one of the few teams that can really keep up, and probably have slightly more, or at least when they had Turner, more answers than the Knicks do for them. So, and they just got Zubac, so it would be interesting next year. But this year, yeah, I think that if those two guys play up to their potential, and part of that will be buying into this scheme and not just being ISO and doing those other things. I'm pretty confident. I do want to ask this because a lot of people have been circulating. Brunson is a negative on off this year. If you look at the splits with him on the floor without Cat versus Cat on the floor without him, and obviously it's better with Cat. And obviously there's it's when these players are being deployed. Brunson obviously plays heavy minutes. Is often playing against the best defenders, is asked to carry the load, doesn't get favorable matchups. The attention is really focused on him in a way that even if Cat is running the show at the bench, isn't exactly the same. But defense especially, it's a huge swing with Brunson on the floor. Do you think Brunson's defense has been palpably worse? Do you think it's because they're trying too many different ways to hide him, and with him on the floor, they just haven't found that cohesion? That they seem to be working around Cat a little bit more. Curious what your thoughts on that whole thing, but especially the defense are with Brunson.
I don't know. I don't think much of it in the regular season. I'll tell you that much. I think Brunson had a bad stretch. Really bad stretch on defense, like atrocious. Maybe the worst he's had in his time as a Knick. And just came square in the middle of that 2-9 stretch. It was even before that. I thought he was terrible on Christmas Day. There were a couple games before that where I thought he was pretty bad on defense. The Spurs game, the Pelicans game that they won, the Hawks game that they won. Like, there, whatever. You don't need to go through it all. But the Christmas Day game, yeah, like he had really bad defensive performances. And he has picked it up tremendously since then. Do I think he's a lockdown defender or anything? No. I think he's definitely a guy that you have to, do your best to avoid kind of putting into disadvantageous situations. They've done a better job of that this year. I think they've done a better job of trying to switch beforehand and trying to keep him out of the action and all those type of things. Is there going to be points in time in the playoffs, especially where he's going to be a problem for you? Yeah, there will be. But that's been the case now for a couple of years. And if it was so easy to just capitalize on that, the Knicks wouldn't have won a playoff series 3 straight years. They wouldn't have gotten to a conference finals last year. They wouldn't have won 2 games of the conference finals. And really probably should have at least gone to a game 7 of the conference finals if we're being real. Like, those things would not have happened if Jalen Brunson was such an incredibly poor defensive player that, could not be masked and created so many structural issues that could not be overcome. Can you win a title with him and all those things? Like, I think you can definitely win a title with him. Is it harder than it would be with other guys? Yeah, probably. But, you don't get to pick your stars in a lot of situations, and the Knicks certainly don't get to pick and choose with Jalen Brunson, given everything he's given them, from the contributions on the court to the contractual decisions he's made off of it, which he talked about in Vanity Fair briefly. I think, again, a quote that was probably not as alarming as it might seem on the surface, but whatever. Um, but yeah, like I don't really take much of the on-off stuff. I don't really care about it that much with him. I think the Knicks have had a kind of a weird season in a lot of ways, individually, collectively, and the broader sample with Brunson is that he is a very strong positive player for them. And I'm just not really ever going to be that worried about it. They have a plus 6.9 net rating with him on the floor. He has a
Nice.
plus 0.9 on off. Um, Again, the Knicks have weird on off numbers, probably because the starting lineup is not their best lineup. It's the reality. Like they're mixed groups. Like they're groups where there's reserves and starters. Like those tend to consistently be better for them. And again, the kind of proof is in the pudding here. The Knicks' two best players by on court and uh, are Deuce McBride and Mitchell Robinson. By on off, it's Mitchell Robinson, or sorry, Deuce McBride and Towns, and then Mitchell Robinson. Alvarado, he actually has the best on off on the team, but he's played 62 minutes, so I'm not putting too much stock into that right now, anyway. The point being is like I just don't take too much from it, and yeah, there's downsides to Jalen Brunson, and there's a lot of fucking upside to Jalen Brunson. And look, there's definitely issues with him and Cat that you have to deal with on the floor when they're on the floor together defensively. But the- you know, I don't. If the goal is like find the perfect lineup, I don't know that doesn't exist. And are they good enough together to win a championship? That's really the question. Are they good enough? Those two guys very specifically. Are they good enough together to win a championship? Um, I think so. I think so. Not a slam dunk, but I think so. And if I'm going to be honest, I would say that some of the issues they have when they're on the floor together, which look, defensively you kind of know that's going to happen. Offensively, you feel like there should be more for them there than they maybe have delivered so far. And um I would say that a larger part of that blame pie, if you want to put it that way, is on Jalen Brunson. I don't think that he kind of finds Carl Towns consistently enough when they run pick and rolls and Towns is popping. I don't. I feel like he misses reads with Towns sometimes. Again, Towns is not blameless in this either. He has weird decisions that he makes when he's kind of put into the roll man action. Sometimes he pops to like 20 feet out. And so it's like, why am I giving you the ball here for a long two? Like, just take a fucking step back so you can make a three. Sometimes he'll roll too fast. He's not perfect either, but I would say a bigger part of the blame there is on the ball handler. It's on the guy that's making the initial read and decision. And Brunson has to improve on that. But I think those two together, and I think Jalen Brunson individually they're good enough to win a championship. Will they do it? I hope so. I hope so because I think this team is as good as anybody in the league. I think they're top 8 guys. I can go to war with that against anybody. And again, is it the perfect group in every single way? No, but no top 8 in the league is perfect in every single way. It doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. And it really never has, right? Like we talk about like, oh, this team, like it's never really been a thing. Every team has weaknesses. Some are just able to mitigate them more than others. But in the modern NBA, with the way talent moves around the league and with the inability to keep teams together the way that you maybe could have in past CBAs, like I think expecting dominance to that degree and roster perfection up and down, your top 8, 9, 10 guys is not realistic at all. And within that kind of framing and within that context, I think the Knicks are up there. They can beat anybody on any given night. I fully believe that. And Jalen Brunson's he's the biggest key to that. Like, forget the fucking I get it, the on offs, and we talk about this stuff all day. Like I do too. But there's no world where the Knicks are remotely as good without Jalen Brunson. And he is their offensive ceiling in a lot of ways. Like, as good as Carl Anthony Towns is, Brunson's the guy who's setting the table. He's the guy that you trust in the biggest moments to create offense for himself, for others, to draw attention, handle ball pressure, all of those things. He is the guy that you trust in those moments. And, um, I believe in him. I think they can win a championship with him. And man, if you don't believe that, then, one, it probably sucks to be a Knicks fan right now then. And two, like, you should be talking about, yeah, we should fucking blow this thing up and trade guys, because if you don't believe that you can't win a championship with Jalen Brunson, really, there's no fucking point to what you're doing here.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit before we get out of here, I think we were ranking the defenders on the strict chord, but it just got me thinking because I think it's not a straightforward answer. How would you rank the Knicks, not necessarily in terms of the best player, but level of importance to the team? Like, if they were to be injured for any extended period of time, this would be the most catastrophic. I think we both would agree that Brunson is number one, right?
Yes.
Who would you say is number two? 'Cause I
So
don't think
most
this.
catastrophic.
Yeah, no pun intended. But yeah, like,
Um,
the most important to the team.
I mean, I know that people will disagree with this. I think it's Carl Anthony Towns. Like, very decisively, I think it's Carl Anthony Towns. Like, OG's awesome. He's great. I think it's not unreasonable to say OG, but without Carl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson has to start playing 30 minutes. He's never as good when he plays bigger minutes. We've seen this time and time again. And then behind Mitchell Robinson, you have Ardell Hukporti, who I still wouldn't totally close a book on, but like, he's not a good player right now. And then then you're trying to figure out, oh, Sohan at the 5 and OG at the 5 and Jemison at the 5 or something. Like, that's a disaster. I think they're much better equipped to overcome OG being out than they are Towns being out. And people can deny that because they don't like Towns' contract or because he commits stupid fucking fouls. And I get it. It's fair. But like, the fact that people get so mad at him about that stuff really kind of tells me exactly what I need to know. The guy's value is immense to this team. He is the reason that their lineups, when Brunson's off the floor, continue to be successful. That they were successful last year, right? With campaign running point. Like, he's extremely, extremely impactful. And quite honestly, I don't think it's that close that he is their second most important player.
Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth. I think what I come back to though is I have seen this team um, push to a 2 seed with with Randall being out, and Randall is the proxy for Towns, right? Because he's really your only other scorer, your creator besides Brunson. They had no Julius Randle, and when OG came back, they beat the Sixers in a playoff series, a tough series. They went up 2-0, and we're on the way to 3-0. Um, OG had 28 points in that game three. Then he went out. And we saw, they just weren't the same without a healthy OG at all that year.
That was in game 2.
No, he got hurt in game three, I think. He got hurt in the second
No,
half.
he got hurt in game 2 at home.
Well, they looked a lot
Game
better with OG, um,
Yeah.
and and they withstood the lack of a second score.
They had 48 minutes of good center play.
Not in Indiana. They only had one center at that point. Now you can say that Hartenstein had
Yeah.
more. I mean, yeah, there were a lot of issues.
You could say 0 centers at the point.
Fart and shit, right? But the point is, they were, they withstood that, so they can withstand a second score. I don't think this team can, especially now. They don't really have. I don't think this team can withstand really their best defensive player, or certainly no lower than 2. So I would probably put OG at number 2, even though I think Cat is a better player over Cat. But my guess is, we can move forward in just the time. You would probably have OG third, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I would have OG third.
Who do you pick fourth? And I think this is one where, I think I've changed a little bit from the beginning of the season.
Uh, I think. I mean, we're just assuming everybody's healthy.
Yeah.
Mitch.
Yeah, it's probably Mitch. I had another thought. That's Mitch. Just we've talked about it. He can swing series. 5, I think I might for 5, I might go Josh Hart.
Yeah, I'd probably go with Hart.
Hart, the only contenders besides are Deuce and Bridges. So I would say Hart though, just because of how well he's been playing, the number of things he does well. I think Deuce is very close, but the gap on defense isn't as big. The shooting is a big difference, but I think we're going to see that. With the Alvarado acquisition, especially, they can. I think they'll be able to manage without Deuce. We really need him back for the playoffs, but I think not having Hart, especially with the number of roles he can play, that becomes a little bit tougher to withstand. And then after at 6, are you taking Bridges then at that point or Deuce? I'm tempted to say Deuce, and I kind of think that's where I'd go.
I would say Deuce. I think if you're telling me like Bridges is out, I'd be like, that sucks, but we have Hart and OG and Deuce can guard up a bit. Like, I think you're okay. Whereas if you lose Deuce, I mean, like we saw it. Like, there's a reason it felt like really meaningful they got Alvarado. On top of the fact that he can handle the ball, he's not a guy that can defend the point of attack. And without Deuce, like that's definitely a problem they have. That's a problem they had last year, right? We talked about it all last year. So, um, yeah, I think you could argue Deuce, but I will say like when we isolate stuff, it's fair to value other guys, but like there is a value to the fact that Bridges plays every game, all the time, every night. Like that guy shows up. He's there every night. And he's gonna play 30 plus minutes every night unless you bench him or whatever. Like he's going to play and he's gonna play big minutes every single night. And I love Deuce. Deuce has never proven to be able to sustain that over the course of one 82 game season, let alone whatever how many fucking seasons Bridges is in. Brunson, awesome player, durable, fights through injuries, plays through stuff. He's not been as durable as Mikal Bridges. Carlton Towns hasn't been as durable as Bridges. OG Anunoby definitely hasn't been as durable as Bridges. Mitch Robinson hasn't been as durable as Bridges. Even Josh Hart, right, this year has not been as durable as Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges is always there. He's always there. And yeah, is it frustrating that you feel like sometimes the Iron Man streak comes at the expense of him playing with a little bit more force, playing with a little more physicality? Yeah, it is. But it would be I would be much more annoyed by it if he also literally did not play 34 fucking minutes every single night. Like the fact that he does that every single night matters a lot. And I think not that I don't value this exercise, and I get your point of this exercise, but I do think that it undersells Mikal Bridges a bit. And I think the way he's evaluated in general undersells a bit the value that him just being there every single game actually has. Considering the fact he's actually good, right? This is not like fucking when like you're like Jesus, can Alfred Payton miss a game here? Um, it's a little bit different. Like Mikal Bridges is actually good, so the fact that he plays every single game, I think, is meaningful. I think it has value, and I think that value can get distorted and dismissed. Maybe because he doesn't have the same type of like individual highs of holy shit right now. Maybe he doesn't have that. This guy's swinging the series. These 5 fucking games in a row. This guy's come in and we are like plus 15 in his minutes every single night. Like he doesn't maybe have that feeling to the impact that he has. But again, like I think part of that is because he plays every night, so you take it for granted a little bit the value he's providing, and it's hard to appreciate. And I think he none of these guys is perfect. None of these guys is above criticism. But I would probably say that like he gets a bit too much. I think him and Towns do. Towns more than anybody. I mean, Towns is like its own fucking thing. But if you again like to go back to the point of your question, like Like, if you take Deuce over Bridges, I don't think it's crazy, but I do think Bridges just again being there all the time is a value that can get lost in this type of an exercise.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm valuing Deuce, and maybe this is not quite as irreplaceable now that they do have Alvarado, but I'm viewing Deuce as by far, I think, their best point of attack defender, and one of the most reliable shooters in a way that Bridges isn't. But the other side of that is, we criticize Bridges when he has the ball as not maybe being as dynamic as you'd like as the kind of second as a guy who can initiate offense. It's much different than Deuce. So I think 6 and 7. I think I would agree with you. Bridges probably 6, Deuce 7, but especially now with Alvarado, maybe easier to withstand that. And look, if we face a team like Boston, you're going to need that length. You're against Detroit too. They have a 6-8 initiator, and then I guess 8 and 9. Who's left? It's Shamit and Alvarado. I think that's probably the order. Shamit gives you a little bit more size, more reliable shooting, and if we're going to ding Deuce a little bit for Alvarado being as a point of attack defender, I guess the reverse is fair to do as well. Now that you have both, Shamit gives you, in some ways, he's probably your best movement shooter. Can get them off balance, plays hard, and has some versatility on defense. Can guard ones and twos at least, and guard up a little bit. I think that's more effort than any real big time talent. Like I think great scorers are still gonna get theirs against them, but I'd probably go 8. And then, but I think Alvarado, the way he's been playing, the energy he brings, that could very easily be flipped too. So.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
there's a couple
agree
clear
with that.
tiers, right? There's tier 1 is I think Brunson by himself. I would say tier 2, I would lump Mitch actually. I would say OG, Cat, Mitch in some order. Or OG, Cat are 2, 3, and then Mitch. But I would put Mitch in that tier. The next tier is probably Hart, Deuce, Bridges, and then the last tier would be getting Alvarado and Shannon. So
Yeah,
and I think
sounds about
that's I mean that's 9 guys who I think in the rotation on any team. I think that's 7 guys who could start on most teams.
Yeah.
So like I said, this is talent definitely. This is a team that should be able to win the East. So
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. All right, I think that's a good place to end this. Stacy, let people know they can find you. Plug anything like plug.
you can find me at StacyPadden89. I'll plug all the great work at the Strickland, as well as a piece by Dallas Amico that just dropped today. It is about it's a philosophical look at from a philosopher on Knicks fandom. So I would check that out, Dallas. If you are on the Strict Court, you are familiar with his essays there, but even better is his essays on the site. So I'll plug that.
Yeah, really good piece by Dallas. I'm nothing to plug personally, so I'll echo those sentiments. I will also plug all the work at the Strickland. I would like to thank our sponsor, FanDuel. The Knicks play the Pistons tomorrow. Pistons are without Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren. The Knicks sounds like they should have their entire team tomorrow. We will see. It feels like a game that they have circled on their calendar. We will also see about that. All right. That is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great week. The Knicks play again tomorrow night. They play Saturday against the Rockets. So interesting couple games here for the Knicks. So that's our show again. And me and Press should have the pod out on Saturday. So be on the lookout for that. All right. Peace.